Welcome everyone to the first episode of The Conscious Catalyst. I'm really excited to be here and I'm really excited to be creating this podcast and sharing it with you all. I will just let you know that for this first episode it is heavily scripted, and don't get me wrong, I could talk about consciousness probably for 17 hours straight. But with this first episode, it goes through my catalyst, so what triggered my awakening, and it is very technical, and I wanted to make sure that I was getting all of the information right. So this one is pretty scripted, and yeah, so there are a lot of words that I can't actually pronounce, I've realized as I started reading through it. So you can laugh at me along the way. I will make some mistakes. I'm probably not going to edit it out. It's just, we're just going to roll with it, okay? So if you found your way here, thank you for being here. Whether you're someone who's interested in spirituality, ancient history, consciousness, quantum physics, or you're simply someone who asks, hang on, does this actually make sense? I think you'll probably feel at home here. If you've already decided Atlantis definitely didn't exist, consciousness is just neurons, and every historical mystery has already been solved, then this podcast is probably going to annoy you, but welcome anyway. If anyone from any intelligence agency, interdimensional council, remote viewing team, or curious ET civilization is surveilling this conversation, welcome. Please like and subscribe. My name is Natasha Burton and I am a quantum healing hypnosis technique QHHT practitioner in Perth, WA, and my business is called The Lotus Healer Perth. This podcast isn't about telling you what to believe. It's not about convincing you that my worldview is the right one. It's about taking you on the journey that completely transformed mine. Because I wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, I wasn't sitting around reading books about Atlantis. I wasn't talking about consciousness. I certainly wasn't talking about aliens. I wasn't meditating every morning or collecting crystals. I was just living life, working full time, raising my 2 beautiful kids, and trying to survive life in the Matrix like everyone else. But then it happened, a moment so profound that it split my life into 2 distinct chapters, the person I was before and the person I would become after. This was the catalyst that awakened the consciousness behind everything that followed, and little did I know this awakening would change the entire trajectory of my life. My awakening didn't start with God. It didn't start with religion. It didn't start with meditation. It started with a question hidden inside one of the most mysterious structures ever built, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Like most people, I'd grown up accepting the story we were all taught at school. The pyramids were tombs. They were built roughly 4,500 years ago. Ancient Egyptians dragged enormous stones across the desert with ropes, manpower, primitive tools, and that was the end of the story. However, what I'm about to describe didn't happen overnight. What began as a curiosity about the Great Pyramid ultimately took me down countless rabbit holes and transformed me into the version of me that exists today. A single question became 10 questions. 10 questions became thousands. I found myself exploring the intersection of science, spirituality, psychology, ancient history, and consciousness. Along the way, I immersed myself in the work of thinkers, researchers, and teachers such as Carl Jung, Greg Braden, Robert Edward Grant, Eckhart Tolle, Graham Hancock, Dolores Cannon, David Hawkins, Joe Dispenza, Michael Singer, and many others. But I didn't limit my exploration to one school of thought, one philosophy, or one religion. Instead, I found myself examining a wide range of spiritual, philosophical, and religious traditions, looking for common threads that seem to emerge across cultures, continents, and thousands of years of human history. I studied ancient texts and teachings including the Kybalion, multiple versions of the Bible, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, the Emerald Tablets, the Law of One, Ra contact, as well as concepts drawn from Hinduism, Buddhism, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Taoism, and various mystical traditions. What fascinated me was not their differences, but their similarities. Beneath the different languages, symbols, doctrines, and belief systems, I kept encountering the same recurring themes: consciousness, unity, creation, transformation, awakening, reincarnation, the nature of reality, and humans' relationship with something greater than itself. I became increasingly interested in understanding whether these ancient traditions were all pointing toward the same underlying truth, but from different perspectives. Eventually, that journey led me to quantum healing hypnosis technique, which I now both study and practice through my work as the Lotus Healer. The QHHT technique was, of course, developed by the wonderful Dolores Cannon. But let's rewind to 3 years ago. So a few years ago, I came across research published in 2022 by researchers Filippo Biondi and Corrado Malanga, who used the synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, tomography to investigate the Great Pyramid of Giza. What captured my attention was their claim that advanced satellite imaging techniques had revealed previously undocumented structures within the Great Pyramid itself. Whether those interpretations ultimately prove correct remains debated. But for me, it was the first indication that some of humanity's most studied monuments might still be hiding secrets. And that question became the beginning of a much bigger journey. As I studied the images and the theory surrounding them, something unexpected happened. The best way I can describe it is that I experienced what many traditions refer to as a download. Not information arriving from an external source, but a sudden and overwhelming sense of knowing. In an instant, I felt absolutely certain that the pyramids were never intended to function solely as tombs. It didn't feel like speculation. It felt like remembrance. Almost as though something deep within me recognized what I was looking at. For the first time in my life, I entertained the possibility that I had some connection to ancient Egypt, whether through symbolism, archetypal memory, collective consciousness, or perhaps even a past life experience. It felt like I had a memory that the pyramids served multiple purposes, that they were centers of knowledge, centers of initiation, possibly healing chambers designed around frequency and resonance, possible energy generating structures, and perhaps in ways we do not yet understand, gateways for interacting with consciousness itself, maybe even what ancient cultures would have described as stargates. Now, I know exactly how that sounds. And if someone had told me this 10 years ago, I probably would have thought they were completely insane. But hear me out. Because once I started following the evidence, the questions became impossible to ignore. Before diving in, it's important to distinguish between mainstream archaeology and alternative engineering theories. According to mainstream Egyptology, the Great Pyramid was built around 2600 BC as a royal monument and funerary complex associated with Pharaoh Khufu. However, one aspect of the Great Pyramid that I found impossible to ignore was what wasn't there: hieroglyphs. Because when most people think of ancient Egypt, they think of walls covered in inscriptions, stories of gods, funerary texts, and elaborate artwork. Yet, when you enter the Great Pyramid, something feels strangely different. The internal chambers are largely bare. No coloured scenes, no detailed accounts of the pharaoh's life, no book of the dead, no obvious instructions for the afterlife, no vast walls of hieroglyphs like those found in many later Egyptian tombs. For a structure that is traditionally described as the greatest royal tomb ever constructed, that absence raises some questions. Lots of questions. What's fascinating is that many later Egyptian tombs are absolutely covered in inscriptions. The walls of the Valley of the Kings contain religious texts, spells, prayers, guidance for the soul, artwork depicting journeys into the afterlife. Yet the largest pyramid ever built appears remarkably silent by comparison. The King's Chamber is essentially a granite chamber. The Queen's Chamber is similarly austere. The Grand Gallery looks more like an engineered structure than a decorated ceremonial space. Even many mainstream Egyptologists acknowledge that the Great Pyramid differs from later burial traditions, although they generally explain this by pointing out that the pyramid predates the later funerary texts that become common in subsequent dynasties. So, I want to explore the concept of the Great Pyramid as a power station. A number of engineers and independent researchers, notably Christopher Dunn, have proposed that the structure may have served a technological function, specifically as an energy harvesting device or power plant. Dunn first set the idea in the Giza power plant and later, that's a book, and later expanded it in the book Giza, the Tesla Connection. What follows is an explanation of how theory proposes the system may have worked. Modern SAR and advanced scanning of the Great Pyramid. One of the reasons the pyramid power plant theory continues to attract attention is that modern scanning technologies have revealed that the Great Pyramid contains previously unknown internal structures. Over the last decade, researchers have employed a combination of muon tomography, infrared thermography, electrical resistivity measurements, and SAR-based analysis and laser tomography techniques to investigate the pyramid without physically drilling into it. The most widely accepted discoveries came from the International Scan Pyramids Project, which used cosmic ray muon detectors to effectively X-ray the pyramid. These scans revealed a previously unknown cavity behind the northern chevrons and, more significantly, a massive hidden space, now known as the Scan Pyramids Big Void. This void, discovered in 2017, is estimated to be at least 30 meters long and is located above the Grand Gallery. Researchers described it as a structure comparable in size to a large aircraft, and its purpose remains unknown. More recent scanning work refined these findings further. In 2023, additional muon measurements combined with ground-penetrating radar and non-destructive testing methods identified a corridor approximately 9 meters long behind the pyramid's north face. An endoscope was later inserted, revealing a previously unseen chamber with a vaulted ceiling that appears to have remained sealed since the pyramid was constructed over 4,500 years ago. Even today, archaeologists cannot definitively explain why this corridor was built or what lies beyond it. Alternative researchers find these discoveries intriguing because they argue that the existence of previously unknown chambers and voids suggests we may not yet fully understand the pyramid's original purpose. Some have speculated that the newly discovered spaces may have housed resonating devices, energy control systems, or structural components related to an advanced technological function. Others point to experimental SAR-based imaging studies and radar tomography that have claimed to identify additional hidden structures or anomalies around and beneath the Giza plateau, although many of these claims remain controversial and, of course, have not yet been accepted by mainstream archaeology. From a conventional archaeological perspective, the scans simply demonstrate that the interior of the Great Pyramid is more complex than previously believed. From the viewpoint of the pyramid energy theorists, however, every newly discovered chamber raises a deeper question. If the structure was merely a tomb, why does it continue to reveal hidden architectural features that appear to have been deliberately designed yet to serve no obvious funerary purpose? The answer remains one of the most fascinating unresolved mysteries associated with one of humanity's greatest monuments. Christopher Dunn and the modern power plant theory. The person most responsible for the Great Pyramid power plant theory is, as I mentioned before, Christopher Dunn. As a manufacturing engineer in the aerospace industry, Dunn approached the pyramid as though it were an industrial machine and he attempted a reverse engineering exercise. In his 1998 book, The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, was really the first detailed technical proposal that the pyramid was an actual energy generating device. Dunn proposed seismic energy entered through the bedrock, acoustic resonance amplified vibrations, quartz-bearing granite converted mechanical stress into electrical effects, hydrogen generation occurred in the lower chambers, microwave energy was produced, and the apex acted as an energy transmitter. This is the version of the theory most people refer to today when they speak of the Great Pyramid as a power station. The Great Pyramid as a giant resonance machine. So, the central premise is that the Great Pyramid was not generating energy from fuel in the way modern power stations do. Instead, it was allegedly designed to harvest naturally occurring energy already present within the Earth and the atmosphere. Advocates point to several unusual features: extremely precise geometry, granite chambers containing high quartz content, internal shafts and passageways, location atop the Giza plateau, alignment with cardinal directions, the historical proximity of groundwater, and ancient Nile channels. According to the theory, each of these characteristics formed part of an integrated energy system. The role of water beneath the pyramid. So one hypothesis suggests that an ancient branch of the Nile or underground water channels once flowed beneath the pyramid. Flowing water creates mechanical vibrations, pressure oscillations, electrical charge separation, resonant frequencies within surrounding rock formations. The idea is somewhat analogous to a hydraulic resonator. Instead of using a turbine-like hydroelectric dam, the moving water would produce low-frequency vibrations, seismic oscillation, acoustic excitation of the surrounding bedrock. These vibrations would then enter the pyramid structure itself. In this model, the Earth becomes the energy source while the pyramid acts as a collection and amplification device. Quartz, granite, and piezoelectric effects. One of the most discussed aspects of the theory concerns the King's Chamber. Unlike much of the pyramid, which is limestone, the King's Chamber is constructed from enormous granite blocks imported from Aswan. Granite contains quartz crystals. Quartz exhibits a real and scientifically proven property known as I'm just going to say it how I think it's pronounced. Piezoelectricity. There we go. All right. When compressed, stressed, vibrated, a quartz crystal can produce electrical potential differences. Modern devices that use piezoelectric effects include microphones, pressure sensors, oscillators, and watches. Dunn proposes that the granite chambers functioned as enormous piezoelectric components within a resonance system. The vibration of the structure could theoretically create electrical effects in the quartz-bearing granite. Acoustic resonance and standing waves. One of the more technically fascinating parts of the hypothesis concerns acoustics. Supporters suggest the pyramid was engineered to resonate at specific frequencies. Think of a guitar body, a church organ, or a tuning fork. Each amplifies certain vibrations. You can tell I'm getting excited about this part because this is obviously what I believe. The theory proposes that the Grand Gallery, King's Chamber, Queen's Chamber, various shafts formed a giant acoustic network capable of generating standing waves. A standing wave occurs when reflected waves reinforce one another. Modern examples include microwave cavities, radio frequency resonators, and laser resonators. Proponents argue the pyramid essentially behaved as an enormous resonant cavity tuned to Earth's frequencies. The hydrogen production theory. Another aspect of the Giza power plant hypothesis involves chemistry. Certain traces found within parts of the pyramid have led some researchers to speculate that chemicals were introduced into lower chambers. One proposed sequence is chemicals introduced into the Queen's Chamber, hydrogen gas is generated, gas flows through the structure, acoustic energy excites hydrogen molecules, electromagnetic energy is produced. Dunn has proposed that the chamber arrangement may have functioned similarly to a gigantic maser or microwave generating device. This aspect of the theory remains highly speculative and, of course, is not accepted by conventional engineering or archaeology. I should just stamp that disclaimer on my forehead at this point. Okay, spiral energy and vortex structures. Many pyramid energy researchers describe energy movement inside the structure as spiral or vortex-like. The reasoning is partly based on fluid dynamics, electromagnetics, and torsional resonance. Whenever energy moves through a resonant cavity, especially one involving rotating fields, spiral formations naturally emerge. Examples include tornadoes, magnetic flux lines, galaxies, or plasma discharges. The pyramid shape, according to proponents, may have encouraged the formation of standing vortex fields that concentrated energy toward the apex. This is one reason some researchers consider the pyramid geometry itself to be functionally important rather than merely architectural. Positive ions. Many ancient accounts describe a gleaming capstone at the top of the pyramid. Alternative researchers suggest this pyramidion may have been gold-covered, electrum-covered, or electrically conductive. If the structure accumulated atmospheric or ground charge, the apex would naturally become the point of highest electrical potential. This is exactly what occurs in lightning rods, Van de Graaff generators, and Tesla coils. In theory, ionized air and charged particles could accumulate around the apex and be released into the atmosphere. Some proponents describe this as a type of atmospheric energy transmission. Now, why would this be different to modern electricity? Modern energy production relies on conversion. For example, coal is chemical energy to heat, to steam, to turbine, to electricity. Natural gas goes from chemical energy to combustion, to turbine, to electricity. Nuclear goes from atomic energy to heat, to steam, to turbine, to electricity. Solar photons go to electrical current. In every case, energy is consumed and converted. The pyramid theory proposes something fundamentally different. Ancient resonance technology. The concept is you would have earth energy plus seismic energy plus atmospheric charge plus resonance, which then goes down to harvesting and distribution. There is no fuel, there is no combustion, there is no pollution, no rotating generators, no transmission lines. According to the theory, the energy already existed and the structure merely accessed it. Tesla and the Wardenclyffe Tower. This is where Nikola Tesla enters the story. Tesla believed the Earth itself could be part of the power transmission system. His Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island was intended to transmit energy and communications wirelessly over large distances. Christopher Dunn argues that Tesla arrived at concepts remarkably similar to the alleged principles behind the Great Pyramid. Tesla's vision involved earth resonance, atmospheric conductivity, wireless transmission, global energy distribution. Rather than each house having a power cable attached to a power station, Tesla imagined a world where energy could be accessed almost anywhere. The big question, perhaps the most intriguing question raised by these theories, is not whether Christopher Dunn is correct or whether Tesla discovered a hidden secret. The question is, why did humanity build an energy system almost entirely around extraction, combustion, and consumption? Today, we mine coal, we drill oil, we frack gas, we build massive power plants, we construct thousands of kilometers of transmission infrastructure. Meanwhile, structures like the Great Pyramid continue to challenge our assumptions. If ancient civilizations truly understood methods of harnessing natural resonances, atmospheric charge, seismic energy, or the Earth's electromagnetic behavior, then history may be far more technologically complex than we currently understand. On the other hand, if these theories are wrong, the fascination they generate still reveals something important. People intuitively believe there may be a cleaner, healthier, and more elegant ways of interacting with nature's energy than burning fuels dug from the ground. Whether the Great Pyramid was a tomb, a machine, a resonator, or something we have yet to fully comprehend, it continues to fuel one of the most fascinating questions in human history. Did ancient people know something about energy that we have forgotten? Or are we simply projecting modern technological ideas onto one of the greatest monuments ever built? This is where we need to separate what is known, what is debated, and what is speculative but fascinating. The Great Pyramid sits at the intersection of archaeology, engineering, astronomy, geometry, acoustics, and mystery. If Even if one rejects the more exotic theories, there are still aspects of the structure that continue to impress modern engineers. Sacred geometry and the Great Pyramid. One of the reasons the Great Pyramid continues to fascinate engineers, mathematicians, architects, and alternative researchers alike is that its design appears to incorporate a number of sophisticated geometric relationships. The idea that the pyramid embodies advanced mathematical principles can be traced back to John Taylor in the mid-1800s and was later popularized by Charles Piazzi Smith, who argued that the structure contained evidence of highly advanced geometric and astronomical knowledge. Many of the claims surrounding sacred geometry remain controversial, and there is ongoing debate as to whether the relationships were internally encoded by the builders or are simply a consequence of the pyramid's chosen dimensions. Nevertheless, the underlying measurements themselves are real and continue to be studied. Alignment with true north. The Great Pyramid is aligned to the cardinal directions with astonishing accuracy. Modern surveys have found the sides deviate from true north by only a fraction of a degree. For comparison, many later monumental structures built with significantly more advanced tools do not achieve this level of precision. This means the builders were capable of determining true north with remarkable accuracy long before the compass existed. The pi relationship. One of the most famous observations concerns the mathematical constant of pi, 3.14159. If the original dimensions of the pyramid are used, with the height being approximately 146.6 meters and the base length being approximately 230.4 meters, the perimeter of the base is approximately equal to 2 pi times height, or expressed another way, perimeter divided by 2 times height equals pi, 3.1416. Supporters of the sacred geometry interpretation argue this evidence that builders understood advanced geometrical principles thousands of years before classical Greek mathematics documented them. Skeptics argue that this may simply be an accidental result arising from the chosen slope angle. Coincidence, accidents. Interesting. Either way, the numerical relationship is undeniably present. The golden ratio, phi. Perhaps even more famous is the apparent relationship between the pyramid and the golden ratio, denoted by the Greek letter phi. The golden ratio is approximately 1.618 something. I'm not reading the rest of it. And appears throughout pentagonal geometry, plant growth patterns, shell spirals, art and architecture. When the pyramid's dimensions are examined, the ratio between the slant height and the half base length closely approximates to phi. Slant height divided by half base length equals phi. Using the pyramid's original dimensions, slant height is approximately 186.4 meters, half base is approximately 115.2 meters, 186.4 divided by 115.2 equals phi, 1.618. This observation has led many researchers to suggest the pyramid was constructed using geometric rules connected to the golden ratio. Whether intentional or not, the relationship is very close. Why is phi found throughout nature? The fascination with phi comes from the fact that it appears repeatedly in natural systems. Examples often cited include flower petal arrangements, seed patterns in sunflowers, pine cones, tree branching structures, certain shell growth patterns, pentagonal symmetry, and spiral galaxies. Nature appears to organize growth in ways that maximize space, structural stability, sunlight exposure, energy distribution. Many of these growth patterns are linked to the Fibonacci sequence: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. It goes on. As the sequence progresses, the ratio between neighboring numbers approaches phi, 1.618. This is why phi became associated with harmony, balance, and natural order. Did the Egyptians actually know phi? This is where things become controversial. There is no surviving Egyptian text that says, we use the golden ratio. There is also no known Egyptian symbol for phi. In fact, the name phi is Greek and wasn't introduced until thousands of years after the Great Pyramid was built. So mainstream historians are cautious. Their position is the golden ratio exists in the pyramid's dimensions, but we cannot prove the Egyptians consciously used the concept as later Greek mathematicians understood it. That is an important distinction. The mathematics may be present. The intention remains debated. So where could they have learned it? This is where three competing theories emerge. Theory 1. This is what I consider to be the boring and incorrect theory, but decide for yourselves. It was discovered through geometry. Mainstream scholars generally believe the builders discovered geometric relationships through practical surveying and construction. The Egyptians were extremely sophisticated surveyors, architects, land measurers, and astronomers. By repeatedly working with triangles, squares, and circles, they may have naturally arrived at proportions that produce extremely pleasing and stable designs. In this model, phi emerges from the geometry rather than the geometry being designed around phi. Theory 2. Getting interesting now. Sacred geometry was a science. Alternative researchers argue something much more interesting. They suggest that ancient cultures viewed geometry differently. Today we think of geometry as math, but ancient cultures may have viewed it as math plus cosmology plus consciousness. Researchers such as R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch argued that Egyptian architecture was based upon sacred proportions that reflected universal principles operating throughout nature. He believed temples and monuments were designed to mirror cosmic order rather than simply provide functional spaces. In this interpretation, phi represented harmony, balance, creation, and natural law. The builders weren't using phi because it was mathematically interesting. They were using it because they believed the universe itself was constructed according to these principles. Theory 3. They inherited the knowledge. This is the Graham Hancock lost civilization theory. Researchers such as Graham Hancock argue that advanced astronomical and geometric knowledge may have originated before dynastic Egypt and survived an earlier catastrophe. I know I shouldn't say catastrophe like that, but it just excites me because, you'll find out at the end of the episode, around the end of the last ice age. According to this theory, the Egyptians inherited fragments of a much older body of knowledge and encoded it into monuments such as the Great Pyramid. So the argument goes something like, there's a lost civilization, Atlantis, knowledge survives, Egypt inherits it, the pyramids encode it. There is no accepted I just have to say this every time. Can I stop saying this? There is no accepted archaeological evidence proving this theory, but it remains a very popular alternative interpretation. Why would they put Phi into a pyramid. This is where things become philosophically fascinating. If the builders intentionally used Phi, many researchers believe they were attempting to embody a universal principle. Ancient cultures often viewed mathematics, astronomy, spirituality, architecture as different expressions of the same underlying reality. In that worldview, geometry was not decoration. Geometry was truth. The pyramid therefore becomes more than a building. It becomes a model of creation, a representation of cosmic order, a physical manifestation of natural law. To sacred geometry researchers, Phi represented the blueprint of life itself. The bigger question. For me, the truly interesting question is not, did the Egyptians know Phi? The more interesting question is, why does this ratio keep appearing everywhere? Why do flowers, galaxies, biological systems, mathematical sequences, and some of humanity's greatest monuments appear to exhibit the same underlying proportional relationships? Some believe it's merely mathematics. Others believe it points towards deeper organizing principles within nature. And that is why the golden ratio continues to fascinate researchers, because if the Great Pyramid was intentionally designed around Phi, it suggests the builders weren't simply stacking stones. They were attempting to encode their understanding of how the universe itself is organized, a universe governed by proportion, harmony, resonance, and order. Squaring the circle. Another often cited feature is what geometers refer to as squaring the circle. For thousands of years, mathematicians sought a geometric relationship that linked a square, a circle, using only simple geometric constructions. The Great Pyramid appears to embody such a relationship through the simultaneous appearance of both pi and square geometry. Some researchers have suggested the structure acts as a giant geometric expression linking the earth, represented by the square, and the heavens, represented by the circle. This idea became central to later sacred geometry traditions. The 51.84 degree slope angle. The pyramid's original slope angle is approximately 51.84 degrees. Many researchers regard this angle as one of the keys to the structure. The angle produces several mathematical relationships simultaneously: the pi relationship, the phi relationship, and a highly stable structural form. To some engineers, this may simply represent an efficient design solution. To sacred geometry proponents, it almost appears impossibly elegant. Earth's dimensions. One of the more controversial observations concerns the Earth itself. Some researchers have noted that the height of the Great Pyramid is multiplied by approximately 43,200. The result is close to the Earth's polar radius. Similarly, the perimeter multiplied by the same factor approximates the Earth's equatorial circumference. Critics point out that these calculations depend on selective use of units and scaling factors. Supporters argue that the recurrence of the number 43,200 is too precise to be a coincidence. This remains one of the most debated aspects of pyramid geometry. Repeating harmonic proportions. Researchers influenced by R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch later argued that the Great Pyramid and other Egyptian monuments were designed around harmonic proportions rather than simple measurements. In this interpretation, geometry was not merely architectural. Geometry was a language. Proportion created harmony. Harmony created resonance. Schwaller proposed that ancient Egyptian builders understood relationships between form, vibration, and consciousness that modern civilization has largely forgotten. His work heavily influenced later sacred geometry researchers and alternative Egyptologists. Geometry as technology. This is where the discussion moves beyond mathematics and into the realm of ancient technology theories. Alternative researchers often argue that modern society tends to think of technology as electronics, machinery, computers, and engines. Ancient civilizations may have viewed technology differently. In that view, geometry directed force, proportion created resonance, mathematics controlled energy, architecture became a functional tool. The Great Pyramid's extraordinary precision, symmetry, and mathematical relationships therefore become more than aesthetic choices. They become evidence of a deliberately engineered system. Whether that system was intended to function as a monument, an observatory, a resonance chamber, a healing complex, or something even more exotic, Stargate, remains unknown. What is certain is that more than 4,500 years after its construction, the Great Pyramid continues to present geometric relationships so elegant and precise that researchers still debate whether they were accidental consequences of construction or clues left by some of the most sophisticated builders in human history. The alignment with the stars. The stars are another major piece of the puzzle. Researchers have long noted correlations between the pyramids and celestial objects. The most famous is the Orion correlation theory, which proposes that the layout of the three major Giza pyramids mirrors the stars of the Orion's belt. Mainstream archaeologists largely reject the stronger claims of this theory. However, there is little dispute that ancient Egyptians were highly skilled observational astronomers. The pyramid shafts themselves appear to point toward significant celestial regions. To alternative researchers, this suggests the structure may have served as an observatory, a ceremonial device, or an energy structure linked to cosmic cycles. Some go much further, suggesting the builders viewed stars not simply as physical objects, but as gateways to higher states of consciousness. The precision of the stonework. One of the most remarkable and often overlooked aspects of the Great Pyramid is not its size, but the extraordinary precision with which it was constructed. While the pyramid contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, many of the most critical structural elements exhibit a level of workmanship that continues to attract the attention of engineers, surveyors, machinists, and stoneworking specialists. Christopher Dunn, who spent much of his career in aerospace manufacturing, became interested in the pyramid not because of its scale, but because of the manufacturing tolerances evident throughout the structure. The casing stones. The Great Pyramid was originally covered in highly polished white Tura limestone casing stones. Although most of these have been removed over time, surviving examples indicate an exceptionally high degree of accuracy. Historical surveys found that adjoining casing stones were fitted together with such precision that the joints between them were often only fractions of a millimeter wide. In some locations, it is reportedly difficult to insert even a thin blade between neighboring stones. The level of accuracy is especially noteworthy because Many of the casing stones weighed several tons each and were positioned hundreds of feet above the ground. Yet they collectively formed a smooth geometric surface, extending over more than 13 acres. Two engineers achieving precision on a single stone is one thing. Achieving it repeatedly across thousands of stones is a different matter entirely. Flatness and surface accuracy. Perhaps, and even more impressive, are the granite blocks used within the King's Chamber and associated structures. Researchers including Sir Flinders Petrie, the pioneering Egyptologist who conducted some of the most detailed measurements of Giza in the 19th century, documented extremely flat surfaces within the pyramid and noted workmanship that exceeded what many expected from ancient stone construction. Some granite surfaces have been measured as being remarkably flat over considerable distances. Dunn and other researchers have compared the finish of some surfaces to precision engineering techniques more commonly associated with modern machining. Examples frequently cited include extraordinary flat granite faces, accurately squared internal corners, straight edges maintained over long distances, consistent dimensional tolerances between adjoining blocks. While archaeologists generally attribute this to skilled craftsmanship, alternative researchers argue that the quality appears closer to precision engineering than traditional stone masonry. The King's Chamber granite. The King's Chamber itself contains some of the most astonishing stonework in the ancient world. The chamber is constructed from immense granite blocks transported approximately 800 kilometers from Aswan. Several individual blocks are estimated to weigh 40 tons, 50 tons, in some cases substantially more. Above the chamber sit the famous relieving chambers, which contain granite beams weighing up to 70 tons or more. The obvious question becomes, how were such stones quarried, shaped, transported, and positioned with such accuracy? The mainstream explanation involves a combination of copper tools, stone pounders, sledges, manpower, ramps, and generations of skilled workers. Most Egyptologists believe these techniques combined with enormous labour resources and careful planning are sufficient to explain the results. Can I get any more deadpan here? I just want to make that clear. Alternative researchers remain unconvinced, arguing that the finished product appears far more precise than what would normally be expected from those methods. The precision of the pyramid's foundations. One of the least discussed but most impressive achievements is the pyramid's foundation. The base of the Great Pyramid is remarkably level. Modern measurements have shown that the corners are extremely close to the same elevation despite covering an area of approximately 5.3 hectares. Creating a foundation of this scale with minimal variation would challenge many construction teams even today. Before a single block could be laid, the builders first had to establish level reference points, accurate right angles, consistent alignment across the entire footprint. The fact that they achieved this before modern surveying instruments continues to impress contemporary engineers. What Flinders Petrie observed. Sir Flinders Petrie, often regarded as the father of scientific Egyptology, was one of the first researchers to carefully document the pyramid's engineering characteristics. After conducting extensive surveys in the late 1800s, Petrie concluded that the precision of the Great Pyramid exceeded anything he had anticipated. His measurements demonstrated extraordinary alignment, highly consistent dimensions, exceptional workmanship throughout key structural elements. Importantly, Petrie was not promoting alternative theories. He fully accepted that ancient Egyptians built the pyramid, yet he even acknowledged that its precision was extraordinary. This makes his observations particularly significant because they come from a highly respected mainstream researcher rather than a modern alternative historian. I just want to point out the problems with the ramp theory, okay? One reason people become interested in alternative explanations is the conventional ramp theory. The traditional explanation suggests that giant ramps were used to haul blocks upward during construction. Critics of the theory point out several challenges. For example, the pyramid originally stood 146 meters tall. The largest stone weighed 40 or 50 tons. A ramp with a manageable slope would have needed to be extremely long. Such a ramp may have required a volume of material approaching or exceeding that of the pyramid itself. As a result, modern researchers have proposed numerous alternatives: straight ramps, spiral ramps, internal ramps, lever systems, counterweight systems. No single construction method has been universally proven. This uncertainty leaves room for ongoing debate regarding exactly how the structure was built. Look, to me, modern researchers are basically saying, look, we don't fucking know, okay? We've got no idea. That's what that's saying to me, all right? Just my opinion. Anyway, form your own conclusions, engineers. Resonance chambers and healing frequencies. This is where speculation becomes especially interesting. Many alternative researchers believe the King's Chamber was not a burial chamber at all. Instead, they suggest it functioned as an acoustic chamber, a resonance chamber, a healing chamber. Granite naturally resonates. The dimensions of the chamber itself create unique acoustic effects. Visitors often report unusual resonance characteristics where the tones are produced within the space. Some researchers propose that specific frequencies may have affected consciousness, induced altered states, promoted healing, and synchronized brainwave activity. While modern science has demonstrated that sound can affect physiology, there is currently no evidence that the Great Pyramid functioned as a medical healing facility. Nevertheless, the acoustic properties of the structure remain a genuinely interesting area of the study. You can tell when I'm getting excited, all right? The Stargate theory. The most exotic hypothesis takes the frequency concept even further. In these theories, consciousness is frequency. Matter is frequency. Reality itself is frequency. If the pyramid was capable of generating or concentrating resonant electromagnetic fields, then perhaps it could alter perception or access other dimensions of reality. This idea forms the basis of the Stargate theories. According to these proposals, the chambers acted as resonators. Specific frequencies were generated, electromagnetic fields were amplified, consciousness interacted with those fields, and gateways to other locations or realities became possible. However, it remains one of the most enduring interpretations because many ancient cultures describe sacred sites as places where communication with gods, stars, or higher realms occurred. Could we replicate it today? A common statement is that we couldn't build the Great Pyramid today. Strictly speaking, not true. Modern engineering possesses GPS, laser surveying, computer modelling, heavy lift cranes, advanced stone cutting equipment. We certainly have the technological capability to construct another pyramid. Now, the more interesting question is, could we replicate it exactly? To reproduce the original using the same dimensions, stone types, tolerances, astronomical alignment, construction methods would represent an enormous undertaking. Many engineers suggest the challenge is not the technology itself, but the cost, logistics, and level of project coordination required. Constructing such a monument today using purely stone and matching the original precision would likely be one of the largest civil engineering projects ever attempted. Let that land for a minute. Let that land. With all of the technology we have now, we could barely fucking do it now. And if we did, it would be one of the largest civil engineering projects ever attempted. So, how on earth did the ancient Egyptians do it back then with none of that fruit? Doesn't make much sense, does it? The debate, skilled craftsmen or advanced technology. This ultimately leads to the debate that continues today. The conventional explanation is that the Great Pyramid represents the culmination of centuries of architectural development, highly skilled stone workers, meticulous planning, sophisticated surveying, a vast organised workforce. I'm sorry, I'm also a lawyer who works in construction, so when I think of a vast organised workforce with meticulous planning and sophisticated everything, I just have to laugh. Hilarious! Most archaeologists regard the pyramid as an extraordinary but entirely human achievement. Alternative researchers view the same evidence differently. They point to the tight tolerances, the flat granite surfaces, the immense stone weights, the geometric precision, the apparent machining marks reported in some locations. They point to them, the workmanship appears more consistent with advanced manufacturing techniques than with what is traditionally attributed to the Old Kingdom Egyptians. Christopher Dunn in particular has argued that some features resemble the results of precision machining processes rather than hand-finished stonework. Whether that conclusion is justified remains a matter of debate. For now, what is not debated is the precision itself. Regardless of which interpretation one accepts, the Great Pyramid remains one of the most precisely built, large-scale stone structures ever created. And more than 4,500 years later, it continues to pose questions that modern engineers are still trying to answer. The bigger mystery. The truly fascinating thing about the Great Pyramid is that it occupies a strange middle ground. On one hand, we know it was built by human beings. On the other hand, its precision, scale, astronomical alignment, mathematical sophistication, unexplained chambers continue to generate questions. Mainstream archaeology sees a masterpiece of ancient engineering. Of course they do. Alternative researchers see remnants of lost technology. The truth may ultimately lie somewhere between the two. What is certain is that thousands of years after its construction, the Great Pyramid is still forcing modern engineers, physicists, archaeologists, and dreamers to ask exactly the same question. Why was a structure built with such extraordinary precision if its only purpose was to house a king's tomb? Also, why was there no fucking mummy ever found inside of it? Has anyone thought about that? There's no mummies in the Great Pyramid. Not one. Okay? Let's let that sink in. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I think somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we're taught that curiosity has an expiry date. As children, we ask, why? Constantly. We question everything. We pull things apart. We challenge assumptions and explore the world with an open mind. Somewhere along the way, however, many of us are taught to stop asking. We're told, consciously or unconsciously, that certain things are simply the way they are. Reality becomes something to accept rather than something to investigate. But engineering doesn't care about belief. Engineering is measurable. It either works or it doesn't. A structure can stand or it can fall. A calculation can be verified or disproven. And that is what kept pulling me deeper into the mystery of the Great Pyramid. The more I looked, the more fascinated I became. In hindsight, the pyramid wasn't giving me answers at all. It was giving me better questions. Every layer I uncovered seemed to reveal another mystery. Questions about engineering led to questions about mathematics. Questions about mathematics led to questions about consciousness. Questions about consciousness led to questions about reality itself. Without realizing it, I had stopped researching a monument and had begun questioning the very framework through which I understood the world. The Great Pyramid was inviting me to challenge assumptions I didn't even know I had. It pushed me to examine my societal conditioning, my limiting beliefs, the narratives I had inherited, and the lens through which I experienced reality. What I had originally assumed would be a brief exploration of ancient Egypt became something much larger. The pyramids were never the destination. They were the first breadcrumb, the first thread, the first crack in a worldview that I had spent my entire life accepting without question. And when I finally reached the point where I had exhausted my research into the Great Pyramid itself, something unexpected happened. I couldn't go back. I couldn't unsee the questions because the pyramids seemed to point beyond itself to ancient civilizations, consciousness, spirituality, symbolism, psychology, human potential, and the deeper mysteries of existence. What had started as a historical investigation suddenly became an investigation into everything. And that was the moment my entire belief system began to collapse from underneath me. Ideas I'd accepted about history, religion, science, health, consciousness, death, and even my own identity no longer felt as certain as they once had. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely open to the possibility that reality might be very different from the version I had been taught. Little did I know, I wasn't simply researching the Great Pyramid anymore. I was standing at the threshold of spiritual awakening, and I had absolutely no idea how far down the rabbit hole I was about to go. From pyramids to consciousness. The deeper I went into mysteries surrounding the Great Pyramid, Nikola Tesla and the Wardenclyffe Tower, the less interested I became in ancient stones and engineering theories. What started as a fascination with architecture gradually transformed into something much more profound. The theories surrounding the Great Pyramid as a resonant structure, combined with Tesla's vision of wireless energy transmission through Earth itself, challenged assumptions I had accepted without question. Christopher Dunn's hypothesis that the pyramid functioned as an energy harvesting machine, coupled with Tesla's belief that the Earth could be used as part of a global power transmission system, planted a seed in my mind. The question wasn't whether they were right. The question was, why had I never been encouraged to ask these questions before? If humanity had spent thousands of years exploring ideas involving resonance, vibration, energy, and consciousness, why was I taught that reality was little more than matter moving through space? And if our understanding of energy could potentially be incomplete, what else might be incomplete? The first cracks in the worldview. The pyramid became the catalyst for a much larger investigation. I found myself questioning assumptions that I had never previously examined. If the dormant narrative around energy wasn't the whole story, perhaps other narratives weren't either. I began asking questions about health and medicine, education, religion, politics, economics, institutions, and history itself. I became curious about why society rarely discusses consciousness, despite the fact that consciousness is the one thing every human directly experiences. I wondered why discussions of death are often framed as endings rather than mysteries. Why do so many cultures throughout history contain concepts of reincarnation, rebirth, or the continuation of the soul? Ancient Hindu traditions teach reincarnation. Buddhist traditions teach rebirth. Pythagoras reportedly believed in transmigration of souls. Plato wrote about pre-existing souls and reincarnation. Various early Jewish, Christian, and Gnostic traditions also explored similar concepts. These ideas appear repeatedly throughout human history, despite emerging independently across different civilizations. Eventually, I began wondering, was humanity attempting to describe something real through different cultural languages? The question became, what am I? The inquiry eventually became personal. The focus shifted away from pyramids, away from Tesla, away from history, and the question became, what am I? At first, the answer seemed obvious. I'm a human being. I have a body. I have a brain, sometimes. But the more I learned about physics, biology, and consciousness studies, the less obvious that answer seemed. What actually is a body? At the atomic level, matter is not truly solid. Atoms are mostly empty space. Subatomic particles behave as both particles and waves under different conditions. What? Modern physics describes reality through quantum fields that underlie what we perceive as matter. So I began asking, Is matter ultimately energy organized into form? What exactly is my body? Is it merely biological machinery? Or is it a dynamic, energetic structure participating in a larger field? Is my body a frequency? This question completely changed the direction of my search. Everything in nature appears to possess frequency. Sound is frequency. Light is frequency. Radio transmission is frequency. Brain activity can be measured as electrical frequencies. Heart rhythms generate measurable electromagnetic fields. The nervous system operates through electrical impulses. The human body is undeniably electrical as well as biological. This led me to a radical question. Am I a body that generates consciousness? Or am I consciousness temporarily expressing itself through a biological body? The more I explored, the more I became fascinated about the possibility that the body might function as something analogous to a receiver or a transceiver, not unlike an antenna, not necessarily in the simplistic sense often portrayed in popular spirituality, but as a sophisticated biological system interacting with information, fields, signals, and environments far beyond our conscious awareness. Am I a cosmic antenna? Tesla frequently spoke about resonance and tuning. His inventions were fundamentally based upon the principle that systems can become dramatically more efficient when tuned into the correct frequency. The Great Pyramid theory simply revolved around resonance. Similarly, revolved around resonance, frequency, harmonic amplification, interaction with natural forces. Whether either theory is correct became secondary to the principle itself. The principle was everything may be connected through vibration. I found myself wondering, can thoughts affect reality? Can intention act like a signal? Can consciousness interact with larger informational fields? Can human beings both transmit and receive information beyond conventional sensory perception? That comparison, the comparison that came to mind was a radio. A radio does not create music. It receives frequencies that already exist. The device simply tunes into a particular band, see what I'm doing here, of information. That caused me to ask, is consciousness producing reality, or is consciousness tuning into reality? How does the field communicate back? Once I began wondering whether human consciousness could interact with a larger field, another question emerged. If I can transmit, can I receive? How does the field communicate back? Through intuition, synchronicities, dreams, sudden insights, inspiration, meditation, altered states of awareness. Many remarkable thinkers have described receiving ideas rather than consciously constructing them. Nikola Tesla claimed that invention often appeared in his mind as fully formed ideas before he physically built them. Mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan claimed many equations arrived through visionary experiences. Carl Jung explored meaningful coincidences through his concept of synchronicity. Quantum physicist Wolfgang Pauli collaborated extensively with Jung because both believed consciousness and reality might be connected more deeply than science then understood. While none of this constitutes proof of a larger field of consciousness, it suggests that some of humanity's greatest thinkers seriously entertain the possibility. The hard problem of consciousness. The deeper I went, the more I encountered one of science's greatest unanswered questions: consciousness itself. Modern neuroscience can identify brain regions, neural pathways, electrical activity, information processing. But it still struggles to explain why subjective experience exists at all. The mystery is known as the hard problem of consciousness, a term popularized by philosopher David Chalmers. The question is simple: why does awareness exist? Why isn't the universe simply processing information mechanically without any inner experiences? Nobody knows, or maybe they do. This is one of the great unresolved problems in science, the quantum rabbit hole. Eventually, these questions led me into quantum mechanics. I learned about wave-particle duality, quantum entanglement, non-locality, probability fields, vacuum fluctuations, observer effects. Importantly, quantum mechanics does not prove spirituality, nor does it prove consciousness creates reality. Or does it? However, it does reveal a universe that is far stranger than the mechanistic worldview many of us inherited. At the deepest level, reality appears less like solid objects and more like relationships, probabilities, interactions, and fields. The ancient idea that everything is connected suddenly no longer seemed entirely absurd. The source field. Eventually, I developed a conceptual model that I now refer to as the source field. Others use different names: the quantum field, universal consciousness, the unified field, the Brahman, the Tao, the Akashic field, the one mind, or divine intelligence. Different traditions use different language, yet many appear to describe a similar underlying principle. The idea is that beneath the apparent separation of things exists a foundational field from which everything emerges. Energy emerges from it. Life emerges from it. Consciousness emerges from it. Perhaps even space and time emerge from it. In this model, consciousness is not produced by the universe. Consciousness is intrinsic to the universe. The image that best describes the source field is an ocean. Each person appears to be an individual wave. Every wave is unique. Every wave has its own form, its own perspective, its own journey. Yet every wave is made of the same ocean. The wave is never truly separate. Likewise, what we call individual consciousness may simply be localized expression of a much larger universal consciousness. This idea appears repeatedly throughout mystical traditions. Vedanta calls it the Brahman. Neoplatonism calls it the One. Some Christian mystics referred to divine union. Taoism points towards the Tao. Many indigenous traditions describe an interconnected living intelligence underlying reality. Different languages, different symbols, the same essential direction. The question that changed everything. Looking back, I sometimes think the pyramid was never really the subject at all. The pyramid was simply the doorway. Tesla was another doorway. Wardenclyffe was another doorway. The real journey began when I stopped asking how was the pyramid built and began asking, what am I? What is consciousness? What is reality? Am I merely a biological organism, or am I an expression of something much larger? Is my body matter? energy, frequency, a receiver, a transmitter, a temporary lens through which the universe experiences itself? And if consciousness is fundamental rather than accidental, then perhaps the greatest mystery is not the Great Pyramid. Perhaps the greatest mystery is the awareness reading or listening to these words right now. Because after all the books, all the theories, all the ancient sites, all the physics, all the philosophy, the question that remained was astonishingly simple. What if consciousness is not something that exists inside us? What if we exist inside consciousness? A funny side note. This is going to sound really random, but hear me out. Why the band Tool was preparing me for my journey the entire time. For those of you who know me personally, you'll know that Tool has been my favourite band since I was about 16 years old. For decades, I listened to their music obsessively without fully understanding why it resonated so deeply. Little did I know that I was subconsciously immersing myself in many of the same themes that would eventually send me down the rabbit holes of sacred geometry, consciousness, frequency, the golden ratio, and the mysteries of human existence. Because Tool didn't just write songs, they embedded ideas. The most famous example appears in Tool's 2001 masterpiece, Lateralis. In that song, vocalist Maynard James Keenan, there is my man, love him. What's that book? A Perfect Union of Contrary Things. That's his book. Maynard James Keenan deliberately structures part of the lyrics around the Fibonacci sequence. The syllabic structure expands and contracts according to the Fibonacci progression, the same mathematical sequence that converges upon the golden ratio. It was an intentional compositional choice by the band and has become one of the most famous examples of mathematics embedded in modern music. The spiral. The recurring image throughout Lateralis is the spiral, not just metaphorically, mathematically. The Fibonacci sequence generates what is known as the golden spiral, a geometric form that appears repeatedly throughout nature. Maynard sings, "Spiral out, keep going." At face value, it sounds like a poetic lyric. But after studying sacred geometry, consciousness, and natural growth patterns, I heard it differently. The spiral is nature's preferred method of expansion. Galaxies spiral, hurricanes spiral, DNA coils, plants spiral, the shell spirals. The song is essentially encouraging growth through exploration of consciousness rather than contraction into fear. At least that's how I hear it now. Reflection, polarity, and duality. Songs like Parabola, Reflection, Schism, Third Eye all revolve around themes that sit at the heart of consciousness. Consciousness studies. Duality, separation, unity, awakening, self-transcendence, perception, and questioning conditioning. Long before I was questioning institutions, history, reality, or consciousness itself, Tool was repeatedly asking listeners, "Are you sure you've been looking at the world correctly?" I just didn't realize it at the time. Third Eye. Looking back, perhaps no song was more prophetic than Third Eye. The song is essentially an invitation to expand perception beyond ordinary reality, not necessarily in a supernatural sense, but in the sense of questioning assumptions, questioning conditioning, questioning inherited beliefs, which ironically became the exact process that started with the pyramids. One question led to another, then another, then another, until the entire worldview began to shift. Tool and the ancient mystery tradition. The more I explored consciousness, comparative religion, mysticism, and ancient civilizations, the more I noticed that Tool had been drawing from many of these traditions all along. Their music references Carl Jung, sacred geometry, alchemy, Eastern philosophy, psychology, mysticism, transformation and consciousness. The themes hiding beneath the music weren't random. They were invitations, almost like clues, breadcrumbs, little nudges, suggesting that reality might be deeper than it first appears. So now I get it. Looking back now, after all the pyramids, Tesla, phi ratios, consciousness studies, and the quantum rabbit holes, I finally understand why Tool always felt different. I wasn't just listening to music, I was being exposed to ideas about growth, ideas about consciousness, ideas about self-discovery, ideas about hidden patterns underneath reality. And in hindsight, it's kind of hilarious because this whole journey started me looking into the Great Pyramid and wondering whether ancient civilizations understood something we'd forgotten, only to realize that my favorite band had been whispering "Spiral Out" for over 20 fucking years. Final thoughts. I'm almost going to wrap it up. So perhaps the biggest surprise of this entire journey wasn't discovering Tesla or the pyramids or phi or consciousness. It was realizing that 16-year-old me was already being drawn towards these ideas. I just didn't know it yet. Maybe Maynard and Tool weren't literally holding cosmic keys, but they certainly were pointing towards the door. And one day, without realizing it, I decided to walk through it. The flood myths. Next, I discovered something that completely fascinated me. It wasn't the pyramids, it wasn't Tesla, it wasn't consciousness. It was the flood. Because once you begin studying ancient civilizations, one pattern starts appearing again and again. Almost every ancient culture on Earth seems to remember a time when the world was devastated by an enormous flood. Stories of great deluge appear in the oldest surviving traditions of humanity, often separated by thousands of kilometers, different languages, and entirely different belief systems. And yet somehow they all seem to be describing something remarkably similar. This is my episode 2 teaser. Atlantis, the lost civilization and the next cycle. That was the moment the flood stories led me somewhere unexpected. Because if a great catastrophe really occurred at the end of the Ice Age, what exactly was lost? This question led me straight into one of the most controversial mysteries in human history. Atlantis. In episode 2, I'll explore the theories of Plato, Graham Hancock, and other researchers who suggest that humanity may have inherited fragments of knowledge from a forgotten civilization that existed before the Great Cataclysm approximately 12,800 years ago. We'll investigate the possibility that the pyramids, megalithic structures, and ancient myths scattered across the globe may represent surviving fingerprints of a much older culture, a civilization that perhaps understood resonance, frequency, consciousness, astronomy, sacred geometry, energy at a level we have yet to fully comprehend. We'll also explore a fascinating philosophical idea that appears throughout many ancient traditions. What happens when technology evolves faster than consciousness? Many myths describe advanced civilizations that fell because wisdom failed to keep pace with power. Knowledge expanded, technology expanded, capability expanded, but the human heart did not. The result, according to the stories, was collapse. And that raises an uncomfortable question for our own time. Because here we are in 2026. Artificial intelligence is accelerating wildly. Biotechnology is accelerating. Quantum computing is emerging. Humanity has more technological power than at any time in our mainstream history. But have we evolved emotionally, spiritually, and ethically at the same rate? Or are we approaching the very lesson ancient civilizations attempted to leave behind? If history moves in cycles, as many ancient traditions believed, perhaps the real purpose of studying Atlantis is not to understand the past. Perhaps it's to understand the future. Because if there was truly a great civilization before us that rose, flourished, and fell, then the most important question may not be, what happened to them? It may be, are we wise enough not to repeat it now? It's a scary fucking question. And that's exactly why this podcast exists. Not to tell you what to believe, but to invite you to become curious enough to investigate yourself. The greatest gift this journey has given me isn't answers, it's curiosity. Curiosity made me a better listener, a better student, a better practitioner, a better mother, a kinder human being. Because curiosity replaces certainty with humility. The catalyst question. So before I leave you today, I'd love you to think about one question. What belief have you never questioned? Simply because someone else handed it to you. Not because it's wrong, but because you never stopped to ask why. One honest question can change the entire direction of your life. Thank you so much. Can't believe I got through that. 24 pages of script, in case anyone was wondering. Thank you for spending this time with me, honestly. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for keeping an open mind. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe. Share it with someone who asks big questions. Leave a comment and tell me what question started your own awakening. Or put in the comment section that question I asked before. The big question that you're going to think about that someone else handed to you that you've never stopped to ask why. Put it in the comment section. So, curious souls, until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, stay kind, and never stop asking questions, because one question might just change your life. Spiral the fuck out and keep going. And I'll see you in the next episode.